that they appear that
Okay.
I'm on my list. I don't.
Fair enough. No, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that so they could hear that. It helps them. So
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Mark Fisher, presenting HJ6, which is titled United States Constitution, Amendments, Convention, and Limitations on Federal Power. This joint resolution states that the General Assembly applies to the United States Congress for an amendments convention to be called pursuant to Article 5 of the United States Constitution as soon as 2/3 of the states have applied for a convention to propose amendments to the United States Constitution that impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit the terms of office for officials of the federal government and for the members of the United States Congress. Delegates to the convention from Maryland may not propose amendments that do not address the goals listed in the joint resolution. The application constitutes a continuing application until at least 2/3 of the legislatures of the states have made application for an equivalently limited amendments convention. That is essentially what the bill does. Currently, the Convention of States in the state of Maryland is not only growing rapidly, but we have 22,000 members and growing, and especially during the past 24 months. But of course, it has been growing over a course of years. I just wanted to say this, we have kind of a who's who from the Convention of States today, all of whom will be testifying, and you will be hearing from them very shortly. I know that this is a busy week for everyone, so I genuinely appreciate your patience. For me, I will tell you that one thing that bothers me about what I see at the federal government, and I can define this pretty succinctly, and that is executive orders, whether it is a Republican that signs executive orders, who's a president of the United States, or a Democrat who signs executive orders. It is, to me, the equivalent of a decree from the King of England, like from King George III, the very person whom we were trying to get away from. Yet it is indeed a decree without question, and it shouldn't be happening, yet it is. And it is Republicans and Democrats without question, because we see it obviously on both sides, and all of us have. And the other thing that bothers me, and before I turn it over to our incredible panel, is it really bothers me that we have these massive omnibus bills in Congress that deal with 1,000 different subject matters and or 1,000 different line items that deal with spending. I think things would be so much better and more understandable and more transparent for the American people if they could actually vote on each bill individually, whatever that bill may be. So if it's a spending bill that's going to provide foreign aid to a specific country, then that should be a single bill. And yes, there may very well be 1,000 bills that members of Congress have to vote on over a period of 2 weeks. But at least that would be easier to understand and more transparent. So with that, Madam Chairwoman, I would like to turn this over to the illustrious panel that we have for you, and I know that you have a list. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. First, do any of members of the committee have questions for the sponsor? I don't see anyone.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to take these in groups of 5, and then we will take questions at the end of each group of 5. I'm going to announce the first 5, and then we will move forward. There are, I think, 19 witnesses in addition, or 18 or 19. So we'll start with Gail McCowan, then Jacob Goldberg, then Robert Betts, Coley Brown, and Andrew Weaver. So in that order. So Gail McCowan, please. All right, thank you. We're going to take these in groups of 5, and then we will take questions at the end of each group of 5. I'm going to announce the first 5. Go ahead.
You ready for Gail? Me?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you to the committee for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Gail McCowan, and I am a retired Lieutenant Colonel of the U.S. Army. Service members who take an oath to the Constitution truly understand the meaning of service to something bigger than themselves. This virtue is often lost on career politicians serving in Washington. When politicians are elected, they go to Washington with the greater good of constituents in mind. But over time, citizens' confidence in Congress has been on a rapid decline. The federal government has become much larger than our founding fathers ever intended. New committees, new commissions, new regulations, new policies, new agencies are started on a regular basis. And with each new initiative comes the need for money, while creating new solutions to old problems, with my tax dollars going towards federal solutions, when many of these problems could and probably should be solved right here at the state and local level. Why wouldn't we want our Maryland dollars going towards Maryland solutions? During the past 10 years, there has been a paradigm shift towards infringement on constitutional rights, to include surveillance of citizens, big government spending, censorship and information and free speech by big tech. This erosion devalues our Constitution, and if we, the people, can't get our elected officials to work on our behalf, nor hold them accountable, then the check and balance answer is this resolution, Article 5. As a member and leading participant in the Convention of States, Maryland would have the ability to address limitations on this out-of-control federal overreach. It's very simple. This is a constitutional solution to a constitutional problem. And I hope that you will see this as something that will give the state more power and give it a louder voice through the use of this convention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jacob Goldberg.
Hey there, good morning. My name's Jacob Goldberg, and I live in Riverdale Park with my wife, Sarah, and in a few short months, our first child. I've worked as a social studies teacher in the Prince George's County Public School System for almost a decade, and I'm here to support HJ6. Specifically, I wanted to talk to some of the fears that people have about a convention of states. And a common fear tactic used by folks who don't support HJ6 is to claim that it opens the door for a runaway convention. Opponents of convention states often claim that the delegates at the original Constitutional Convention in 1787 were instructed by the legislature under the Articles of Confederation to hold a convention to fix or alter the government's guiding document, and that the representatives at that convention, instead of altering the articles, just scrapped it and created an entirely new system of government. In my high school civic class, I've explained many times that the whole reason that we had that convention in 1787 was that the legislature set up under the articles was so weak that they could only really make recommendations to the states, not binding legislation like today's Congress, meaning that the convention was not called by the federal government, but by the states themselves. If you weren't familiar, the impetus for that convention in 1787 was actually a small meeting in a place called Mann's Tavern, located just a few blocks from your seats in the Maryland State House. It was there that delegations from several states met to discuss how to improve the federal government. Those delegates decided that we needed a convention of states to address the issue of a failing federal government. While the government under the articles gave a token blessing to this endeavor, it only happened because the state legislatures actually called it by passing resolutions much like the one I'm asking you to support today. Today we have a similar situation where people are dissatisfied with the federal government, and we know that the federal government cannot solve the problem themselves.
Can you please summarize now?
Absolutely. So that's why I'm here, playing hooky from school this morning to ask you to do what those that came before you did. Support HJ6 and call a convention of states. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert Betts. Mr. Betts, are you here? I see you. You're muted. You need to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Got it. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Thank you.
2 minutes.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Bob Betts, and I'm the State Information Analyst for the Maryland Convention of States team. As I said when I was here last year, I've been a Maryland resident and a federal employee for 37 years. I said then, and I still am, proud of the work I do, the people I work with, and the organization I work for. I'm here today to address the federal government's overreach of its constitutional power. The recent presidential election is a glaring example of that. The current and previous presidents have extremely different visions for our country. They both put a lot of effort into reversing their predecessors' work, and both did, or still are, dramatically changing America. Both broke their oaths of office in doing that. Being commander-in-chief, sharing a short list of responsibilities with the Senate, and a few other things, a president has one primary role. Quoting the Constitution, he shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Period. That's it. The president's responsibility is to implement and execute the laws passed by Congress. Executive orders are a tool for doing that, and only that. They don't replace laws, they don't change policy, and they don't affect international relationships. Regardless of your opinion of either administration's action, both presidents and many before them stole power that belonged to Congress. The federal government no longer governs, it rules directly in opposition to what the Constitution allows and in ways the Constitution specifically empowered the states to prevent. It's up to the states to stop federal overreach, restore the Constitution, and reclaim their own power. The Convention of States is how we do that, which is why I'm asking you to support Resolution HJ6. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Coley Brown. Coley Brown.
Hello, Madam Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Rules Committee members. I am Coley Brown, a resident of Earlville in Cecil County. I have undergraduate degrees in math and economics and received my MBA in 1972. I'm a Convention of States district captain representing 912 HJ6 supporters in District 36. I'd like to discuss fiscal responsibility, but first, there's a reason HJ6 requests Maryland participate in a debate of 3 constitutional amendments. Without all 3, no single amendment will be effective. Let me explain. A lack of government fiscal restraint and its associated deficits are terminal. In 2020, every tax-paying citizen owes the federal government over $200,000. This shortfall provides the Fed the ability to excess fund 40 of our 50 states. This is the addictive cornerstone of our budget gridlock, and it enables federal financial blackmail. Many Convention of State naysayers argue that fiscal restraint means higher taxes and reduced services. This does not need to be true. HJ6 can restore fiscal responsibility by reducing federal financial overreach. HJ6 combined resolutions can transfer overreaching federal functions back to the states, where all budgets are balanced and there is local accountability. States would retain a portion of their federal tax revenue for the recovered programs. The result will be to eliminate expensive federal departments with balanced and locally accountable state programs. Why should Maryland legislators and citizens want this change? HJ6 and a Convention of States could double Maryland's state budget and give local legislators control over critical state programs. I ask you to move HJ6 out of committee and allow the process to begin. Thank you, committee members and Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Andrew Weaver. Mr. Weaver, you're muted. There you go. Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee, thank you for hearing our testimonies today. My name is Andrew Weaver. I'm 22 years old, and I came to Maryland with Navy parents who were stationed at the Indian Head Naval Base. At this point, I've been self-employed and worked for small businesses for most of my employment history. Throughout this time, I've seen many small businesses struggling with meeting the regulations placed upon them through the overreach of federal lawmakers. Just one of these examples is the Affordable Care Act. Instead of allowing self-employed Marylanders to choose local health insurance agencies, we're forced to use the options provided by the federal government regarding who we can hire, how many hours they can work, and the healthcare agency we have to buy for them and ourselves. According to the 10th Amendment, all these powers belong to state legislatures like yourselves. And the reason for this is to ensure that Marylanders can make financial decisions that support Marylanders. In addition to this theft of power from the states, Congress continues to exempt itself from following the rules it makes for the rest of us. In the Affordable Care Act, the members of Congress have been granted thousands of dollars every year to ease the burden on them, while Maryland small businesses can't afford to hire an employee full-time due to the cost of meeting these mandates. This and other acts continue to demonstrate that there are indeed 2 laws, one for Congress, one for the rest of us. For this reason, I've chosen to support the Convention of States Resolution HJ6 and would humbly request that y'all would do the same. One of the goals of this resolution is to restrict the power of the federal government through an amendment to the Constitution protecting the power of state legislatures. Marylanders deserve to be able to debate this on the floor and to make the decision whether or not they are willing to end federal overreach in our state. For this reason, I ask you to support HJ6. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this first group of 5 witnesses? Seeing none, we'll move on to the second group. I'm going to announce them and the order. The next 5 are Steve Shapiro, Paul McElhenney, Nicole Weekly, Michael Riley, and Vince McAvoy. So we'll start with Steve Shapiro. Steve?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank
My
you.
name is Steve Shapiro from Columbia, Maryland. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. In the late 16th century, after the colonists declared their independence, members of the Continental Congress were not looking to make a career out of federal government. They took time away from farming to serve the people who elected them as representatives, and then the mantle was passed along to other candidates. Today, people earn university degrees to become career politicians and stay in their positions for however long they can survive their re-election campaigns. If only it was just for the desire to serve their constituents. But today we see fighting across the aisles, leaders in both houses that will not allow debate on important issues, bills bundled strategically so as to bargain for policies that could not otherwise make it through on their own merits, and fights over procedure to then inflict action on regular Americans whose voices simply want representation. Term limits should be imposed not only on members of Congress, but also on top-level bureaucrats, such as directors of the FBI, CIA, and the IRS, whose policy decisions affect every citizen. Add to that term limits on federal judges and Supreme Court justices, who are fallible human beings, many of whom legislate from the bench instead of interpreting the Constitution. Sure, if we pass term limits, I'll miss my favorite representatives when it's time for them to give up their office, but we cannot continue down our current road, which contorts the intent of the framers who gave us the republic we must preserve. So I urge you to pass HJ6. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Paul McElhenney.
Hello, Madam Chairwoman and this committee. Thank you for your time. My name is Paul McElhenney. I am the Convention of States District Captain for District 13. I proudly represent 336 supporters of HJ6, and that number grows daily. I support the Convention of States because I believe our current path as a nation is unsustainable, and also that the best government is local government. With that in mind, I simply want Maryland policies made in Maryland by Marylanders with Maryland money. I'm simply asking for your support of HJ6, as I believe Washington, D.C. is broken. The federal government is too large and no one seems to know what's going on. Think about every step of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's been mixed messages, confusion, or just utter failures around funding, guidance, schools, benefits, and now vaccine rollouts. A decentralized DC would have simply sent this legislature money and allowed you to disperse it as needed. However, that didn't happen, and Marylanders are still suffering. Honestly, ask yourselves, what national problems has DC actually solved? Go ahead. I'll wait. Some other great reasons to support HJ6 is that with federal term limits, there will be far more regular vacancies in Congress for new ideas from new representatives, and even possibly more rotation on the courts. Also, through limiting federal overreach and imposing fiscal restraints, Maryland money and power will grow exponentially as all of our state departments will naturally expand with only minimal federal government involvement in Maryland affairs. Please use your vote to advance Resolution HJ6 out of committee and to the House floor for debate, as we are not going anywhere and our resolve for these changes is only growing. Finally, I request that if any of you on this committee haven't read my full written testimony, to please do so. It's quite good, and these 2 minutes just didn't do it justice. Thank you again for your time and consideration of HJ6. And I would like you to note that since we have come on for this session, over 100 more people have joined the viewing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Nicole Weekly.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Good morning. My name is Dr. Nicole Weekly. I'm a behavior analyst, a professor, a Marine Corps spouse, and a mom of 4. My maiden name is Jaskew, which is an anglicized version of Yashkeith, and I'm part of the first full generation of my family born here in the United States as my grandparents immigrated from the Ukraine following World War II. Their childhoods played against the backdrop of the Nazi rise across Europe, where everything they held dear was wiped from existence. It's a unique perspective to learn of freedom from those who at one time didn't have it. You're taught that if you take it for granted, you run the risk of losing it. This is a lesson that has only been strengthened through witnessing my husband's experience as a United States Marine. These lessons are why I'm here today. I think that if all of us in this room were to take a step back and honestly assess the current state of affairs, we would all admit to a nagging fear that we're moving dangerously off course. That each side is honestly worried about who resides in the White House or which party controls the House and Senate. That in and of itself speaks to a dangerous level of centralized power that our founding fathers never intended. Certainly, this last year has shown citizens and states alike just how little Washington works for them, as millions of people have lost their jobs and livelihoods while the governing elite in DC and their powerful donors remained well-financed and protected. I joined this bipartisan effort to call for a convention of states because I believe it is our duty as Americans to hold fast the reins on government. History has shown us time and again that when left unchecked, governments grow, heightening the risk for tyrannical results. I believe that states' rights protect against coercive governing. I believe that fiscal health is the foundation of a free nation, and I believe that lifelong ruling at any level of government is left for kings, and we are a nation of public servants. I would love for this committee to move forward this bill for debate, where ideas can be fleshed out and our state is allowed to take a stand for our most precious ideal, preserving the last best hope of freedom in this world. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Michael Riley.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I thank the committee for the opportunity to testify in support of HJ6 United States Constitution Amendments Convention. I'm Michael Riley. I live in Durwood, Maryland, and I raised my family in Prince George's and Montgomery counties. I'm a small business owner and federal contractor. I volunteer for Convention of States Action Maryland as the District 19 captain and state communications coordinator. Thank you for taking on the responsibility and difficulties of governing and helping Maryland succeed. Today, I ask you to consider what you need to do as Maryland leaders in the coming rebalancing of federal and state responsibilities. Things that can't continue eventually stop. The federal government is bankrupt, borrowing money we don't have with no plans to repay. What is Maryland going to do? As Texas froze and California burned, we saw finger pointing and failures with both state and federal government. Solutions dreamed up for California and Texas didn't work there. Why should we let others impose them on us here? As legislators, federal impositions affect your daily work. Use our smart, dedicated, innovative Marylanders to help you craft solid local solutions. If you listen, people are saying the federal government is not meeting our needs. This can't continue. So the question for you as Maryland's leaders is how to manage the coming change. Will we carve out hope for Maryland, or will DC dictate our demise? Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution guarantees Maryland a voice. For the equity of Marylanders, I ask that you, our delegates, use the Article 5 guarantee to ensure your voice is heard loud and clear when the inevitable comes. I'm certain Texas, California, and New York will. Please secure your spot in history and support HJ6 being forwarded from the committee to be considered by the full House. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Next is Vince McAvoy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee. I'm so grateful for your time on this bill. I appreciate it. You've already heard the mechanics and the basic premise for the Article 5. The organization is mounting. We're looking at thousands and tens of thousands who are concerned about the financial fate of our state and our country. If we look at how the country was started, it was started on a firmer ground. And I want to bring up something that the sponsor had mentioned regarding this back and forth that we're having in DC, and in which Maryland has really no say on it. The prayer at George Washington's public freed laying, I now make it my earnest prayer that God would have the United States in his holy protection. And he goes on to say, which were the characteristics of the divine author of our blessed religion, and without an humble imitation of whose example in these things, we can never hope to be a happy nation. Amen. There are long-term financial issues that would take us an exceptionally long time to dig through. When we're looking at amendments, for instance, the transgender bill, where we're allowing that into the military, where the previous administration turned it off, and now this administration turned it back on, you're having people who are, they're struggling with where the state and the federal government lies with these things. Such a thing could be handled by an amendment to the Constitution. And I think that for clarity's sake, some of these people, depending on what side you take on these things, they're midstream in their transformation. And they're actually going online to get, I think some of these are scams, but GoFundMes for their surgery. So we have a disconnect in DC from morality's sake. And I think it's time that Maryland looks to the roots. And I thank you for your time.
Can you summarize? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for this past group of 5 witnesses? I see no one on the committee with questions. So I'm going to go on to the next group, which is in order: James McQueen Sr., Stephen Patton, Richard Bibby, John Goff, and Robert Kelly. So Mr. McQueen, please start.
Just a second, I'm starting my video.
Hello?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to speak today. I'm James McQueen, Southern Maryland captain for its Convention of States. I was born at Bethesda Naval Hospital, and my home is in Calvert County. I'm here to testify for over 2,200 Southern Maryland COS petitioners and the rest of our Maryland citizens. I need to talk about how the federal government infringes on the rights of every state and American citizen. One example is the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion amount of debt to help Americans recover from COVID-19. Also, don't forget the previous $4 trillion in funds for COVID-19 vaccine, small business relief, direct payments to individuals, pork, and etc. The new American Rescue Plan has only designated 9% directly related to COVID-19. 91% is for the expansion of more uncontrolled programs, pork, and unrelated policy changes. And already on a daily basis, the federal government ships skids of $100 bills to other countries. What happens when the citizens can't afford to pay the debt? Who suffers? Not the millionaires in Congress. We do as seniors, our kids, grandkids, are all stuck in an uncontrollable situation of higher taxes and inflation. Now it's time for Maryland to take the power back and use Article 5 of the Constitution to call a convention of states, impose federal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and the jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits on Congress and federal officials. We need to secure the future for all Marylanders and American citizens. Thank you for your yes vote on HJ6.
Thank you very much. Stephen Patton. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Awesome. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Steve Patton. Maryland is my home. I have the honor of being the state director of an all-volunteer organization that boasts more than 22,000 supporters here in Maryland. More than 5,000 of those supporters have joined our movement in the past year. We are growing quickly. I'd like to address a reason why we are growing at such a rapid rate. The falsehoods that have been swirling around the Article 5 Convention of States process have been debunked. Yep, debunked. You've heard these objections before. Let's take a quick look at each and the truth behind the myth. First, how do we know how a convention of states will work? Interstate conventions were common during the founding era, and the basic procedures and rules for such conventions were uniform. The historical precedent is plentiful. One just needs to look. Second, the federal government ignores the Constitution now. Why would the federal government adhere to an amended Constitution? Federal officials don't ignore the Constitution so much as they lawyer around it. This is not the Constitution our federal government is following. This is the Constitution they are following. This is the U.S. Constitution Analysis and Interpretation. It is 3,000 pages, weighs over 10 pounds, and serves as the legal authority for everything that the federal government does. The third objection I want to address, the Runaway Convention, also referred to as a con-con. This entire objection is based in the U.S. Constitution having been illegally adopted. The runaway myth reasoning argues that delegates to the Constitutional Convention disobeyed their instructions and that the ratification process was improperly changed. Both of these assertions have been proven false. Again, one just needs to look. We are not here to debate on objections of an Article 5 Convention of the States. However, I strongly contend there is more than sufficient cause to allow such a debate, and this is why I ask that the members of this committee find HJ6 as favorable so this discussion can move forward. I thank you for your time today and your service to our state.
Thank you very much. Next is Richard Bibby. Mr. Bibby, you're muted. Can you, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Hi.
Yes.
Very good. Fellow Marylanders, I am Rick Bibby, a Leitersburg, Maryland resident and a graduate of the bicentennial class of 1976 from the Parkersburg South High School Patriots. I've been a resident in Washington County since 1991 and a homeowner since 1996 and have American roots dating back to 1620. It is with that in mind that today I rise for myself and over 900 petition signers from District 2 to address those that would object to an Article 5 Convention of States being held. Some will say that we'll be unleashing a Pandora's box upon the country that will destroy everything that has long been held sacred. We stand against that claim, believing that our founders built this Article 5 method that allows for corrections to our future navigation as a bipartisan lifeline to save us from the selfish judgments and stalemated partisanships of the past. If I still believed in my heart of hearts that our elected U.S. and House Senate members would make these changes all on their own, I'd not be here today. But I felt an urgent call for my voice to be heard. That same call was once answered in 1776 by 56 regular citizens with an average age of just 45, of which 2 of those were self-educated men, 1 a cobbler and 1 a carpenter. None of those 56 could ever have been called a statesman, yet they found the courage to believe in something bigger than themselves. We now owe the same to the future generations of Americans to use the founders' tools to make the adjustments needed to allow this great experiment in a government of, by, and for the people to live on forever. Our nation needs us now. My simple theory of life is a simple one. It's 1 + 1 = 3. It's not what I do, nor what you do, but when we do it together, we can change the world. And your bipartisan part in saving the country starts right here, right now, by simply voting with the growing groundswell of concerned Marylanders statewide to approve HJ6. Thank you to you and all the hundreds that are watching us on screen right now. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. John Goff.
Good morning. Hear me okay, ma'am?
Thank you. Okay, your name on there is Dave. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. First name John, middle name Dave. Go by Dave.
Okay, go for it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee. Thank you for your service to the citizens of the state of Maryland, and thank you for this time to speak with you this morning. As we just discussed, my name is Dave Goff. I'm a lifetime resident of Maryland. I participated in every election at any level in our state that I was able to. Additionally, I'm a retired state law enforcement with 30 years experience who appreciates law and order as well as the rule of law. This is why HJ6 appeals to me. It's the legal process for the citizens to utilize the right granted them by the Creator and memorialized in the Constitution to bring the change at the federal level that our elected and appointed officials choose not to. I believe that our federally elected and appointed officials need term limits that they refuse to pose upon themselves. In a poll conducted by McLaughlin and Associates released in February of 21, 89% of those polled were in favor of term limits for members of Congress, and 59 in favor of term limits for Supreme Court justices. I believe a regular purge of sitting legislators is essential to promote new ideas and reduce corruption. The founders of this great country never intended for the federal government to be as large as it is or have the amount of power that it does. That right was reserved for us, the states. Those federal elected positions were never meant to be full-time careers. This country cannot move forward on the stale ideas of politicians embedded in their positions for 40 plus years. I also fear that anyone who holds a position of great power for extended periods becomes more susceptible to corruption. Even the federal prison system understands this issue and requires prison employees to be moved within the system every 3 years to deter abuses of power. Please give HJ 6 the time it deserves and the opportunity to be debated on the floor. Thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. Robert Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Robert Kelly. I'm here as General Counsel for Convention of States Action. We are a nationwide grassroots nonprofit organization that has over 4.8 million supporters across the country, many of whom you've just heard from here in the state. I don't really think I can improve upon the testimony that they've already given, other than just to emphasize that this piece of legislation is one that enjoys bipartisan support across this country. Majorities of both Republicans and Democrats support this piece of legislation in every state where it's being run. It's currently being run in 20 other states right now, and it has passed in 15 states across this country. The purpose of this legislation is to give people a seat at the table and to be able to speak to their politicians in Washington, D.C. Majorities of both Republicans and Democrats believe that you as state legislatures do a better job representing them than their congressional representatives up in Washington, D.C. And really, that should be no surprise, since you are closer to the people that you represent. I encourage all of you to adopt this, to pass this resolution out of committee and to support the will of your constituents here in the state. With that, I open it up to any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this group? I see a hand raised by Delegate McComas.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for Mr. Kelly or Mr. Patton. Okay. This is a national effort. What states have signed on to this at this point? I think it was mentioned for this group states have passed it.
Sure, yes, Delegate McComas, I'm happy to list out the states. This has been adopted in 15 states so far. Those states are Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Utah, and Tennessee, as well as Texas.
Thank you. The other question I have is, okay, there's been a real concern over the years that an Article 5 convention would not be limited. And as basically, I think there's a concern that we would literally upend and rewrite the Constitution. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think there's no substantial risk of a convention running away or somehow rewriting the Constitution. This application here invokes the article of the legislative authority that this legislature has under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. And Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution specifically says that the legislature has the ability to apply for a convention for proposing amendments. And I think both of those words are critically important to understand. First, the convention only has the ability to propose. That is to say, it's essentially a drafting committee. It can come up with a proposal for limiting the power of the federal government, a proposal for term limits on members of Congress, a proposal for fiscal restraints on the federal government. But what it cannot do is enact any of that. Article 5 explicitly states that 3/4 of the states are required to ratify any proposal that comes out of the convention, which is exactly the same requirement that is imposed on Congress itself. And of course, this is an incredibly high burden. It means merely one house in 13 states could defeat any proposal. So the only kind of proposal that you're ever going to see successfully come out of a convention is one that enjoys overwhelming bipartisan support of the American people. Something like term limits that consistently enjoys 80 to 90%, something like a balanced budget amendment, or something that restrains the ability of the federal government to spend above the revenue that it generates, that enjoys consistently 60 to 70% of the American people, and something that curtails federal abuses of powers in other areas. 67% of the American people believe the federal government is too large and tries to do too much. So those are the types of areas that amendments could reasonably be adopted on. There's no realistic chance of an amendment being adopted in another area.
So let me just, so the mechanics would be that the convention of this, who would basically walk through the mechanics of it, like who gets chosen to go to the convention, where was the convention held, and then after the list of bills have been drafted or the issues have been drafted and submitted to the different legislatures, both houses would have to approve the bill, and then it would be given to the governor to sign it, or what they, in other words, what they approved, the agenda items that they approved. In other words, walk me through the process after the agenda of the Convention of the States has been formalized and drafted to go.
Sure. Certainly, Delegate McComas. So the process begins with the state legislatures adopting resolutions, which do not need to be presented to the governor for signature. Article 5 states that once 2/3 of the states have applied for a convention, then Congress has to call the convention. The convention then takes place. The delegates are appointed by the states according to whatever process they've adopted. That could be the legislatures themselves electing the delegates. That could be the legislatures delegating that authority to the governor of the state, or some combination thereof, perhaps the Speaker of the House or the governor, or some committee that's appointed for that purpose. That is up to the states themselves to adopt procedures for. The convention meets. The delegates are limited to debating on the topics that have been specified in the applications by the states, and then they propose out amendments. Once those amendments are proposed, Congress then decides how those amendments will be ratified, just as it does with any amendments that it proposes. It can choose to have those amendments ratified either by state legislatures, which has been the process used by Congress in every instance except for prohibition, the repeal of prohibition, or it can send it to state ratifying conventions, which are essentially designed to represent the people more fully. Once that proposal is sent out to the state legislative bodies, 3/4 of the states, or 38 states with our current 50-state country, need to ratify before those amendments become part of the Constitution.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? I see no other questions from the committee members, so we'll go on to the last group of witnesses. There are 3 left: Michael Colburn, Ginger Barnes, and Leslie Jenkins. Michael Colburn, please.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, members of the committee. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am a proud Maryland resident and a district captain for the Convention of States, and I represent over 700 Maryland supporters here in District 27. During my 25 years in the Air Force, I swore an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States at least 10 times, and I stand by that oath, and I will stand by that oath until the day I die. While I was in the Air Force, I witnessed firsthand the total disregard for responsible government spending. And the federal government's budgeting process has been broken. It's been broken for a long time. Anyone who has worked there knows this, but the average American does not. What Americans do know is that their federal government spending bills are filled with thousands of pages of egregious levels of pork spending. Meanwhile, the quality of public education and government services has been declining for years, and the Washington establishment has ensured that our taxes go up and that spending on special interests in the bureaucracy grows exponentially. The outrageousness of our federal government's fiscal and monetary policy has put us on a path to destroy not only our economy, but free market capitalism. Both political parties are responsible for this reprehensible mismanagement of our finances that belong to the American people. It is time to put fiscal restraints on the federal government. It is time to limit their power and to impose term limits on Congress and other federal positions. For those reasons, it is time to convene a convention of states to amend the U.S. Constitution. It is time for the Maryland General Assembly to side with the American citizen and vote for the passage of H.J. 6. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. we have one more witness. The last witness of the day is Ginger Barnes. Leslie Jenkins is not in the waiting room. So, Ms. Barnes.
Good morning. Yes, I was just asked to let you know that Leslie's a 911 operator and she's on a call, so she can't make it today.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And good morning. My name is Ginger Barnes, and I'm a retired paramedic and a lifelong resident of St. Mary's County. My family dates back to the founding families that first landed in St. Mary's City. And because of this heritage, I have many concerns that affect the state and our communities. As the federal government continues with its overreach of federal spending, our civil liberties, and general welfare, it is clear there are constant threats to our God-given freedoms. Washington continues to display its inability to manage a budget while overspending to the point of mortgaging our children's and grandchildren's futures. They are trampling our First and Second Amendment rights by censoring our speech, censoring our social media, proposing gun reform laws, and continuing to cancel our history. It is, in my opinion, and with your help, the only way we can take back control from career politicians in Washington, D.C. is through constitutional amendments. The states need to take back control now, and you are our only hope in demanding term limits, imposing fiscal restraints, and stopping the growth of the federal government. We, the people of this country, deserve better and expect better from our elected officials. We cannot continue to kick the can down the road and hope for better days. Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution guarantees states an equal voice in the Convention of the States. You can accomplish this by voting for this resolution. We need term limits now. Career politicians have stopped listening to their constituents. Our voices are ignored, and the radical special interest groups are influencing changes to our everyday life. I want better for my family. I want my freedoms preserved. I want my children's futures to remain part of a free and fair republic. I plead with you today to support HJ6 and move this legislation forward for consideration by the full House. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for these last couple of witnesses? If not, thank you. That concludes the public hearing portion of today's.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We do have other business. We have to vote on a number of recess appointments in our role as a committee on executive nominations. And we also have